Don't give up on our marriage for a mistake. Luke Abrams parked at his workstation and waited for the Grateful Dead Ripple song to finish before turning off the engine and opening the door. He looked up at the neon sign above the entrance to the building and felt proud when he saw Abrams Manufacturing written above the door. The guard at the door greeted him as Luke made his way to his corner office on the top floor. His CFO had told him that the company was now worth $20 million. And not a month went by that some firm or venture capitalist didn't want to discuss buying the business. Luke wasn't interested, as he loved his job, his business, his team of people, and he saw no reason to cash out at this young age. Life was good. His family life had been great all these years. He and Becky, his wife of 14 years, had struggled at first when he started his business, but now lived very comfortably. Becky worked part-time as a marketing consultant and often worked from home. She was tall, 5 feet 8 inches tall, with fiery red hair and an incredible body. Her breasts and ass were perfect, and she had bonus legs that stretched for miles. Their sex life was really good, although Luke had noticed a definite decrease over the last 6 months, from 3 to 4 times a week to just once a week. Becky also seemed to be more attached to her phone, sending messages to God knows who, and one day when he picked it up to check match results, he noticed that it was now password protected, something that hadn't been the case in the past. He talked to her about sex and how she had become more reserved and quiet in their interactions, but she said that she felt older and more tired, and he should just know that she loved him more than he ever imagined. They talked about kids. She didn't want any yet, but he told her how important it was to him, and she agreed that within 6 months she would give up birth control. She wasn't as excited about it as he was, but he thought she was thrilled with the idea. As Luke sat in his office thinking about it, his friend and VP of Sales, Chad Warwick, walked into his office looking shy. Chad had been friends with him in college, and they had played soccer and hockey together in high school. He wasn't his best friend, but Luke considered him close. Now the relationship was a mixture of friendship, but also Luke was the boss. And although he treated his employees as partners, Luke ultimately decided what they should do. Chad peeked through the door and said, "Boss, I'm not feeling well today. I think I have the flu or something, so if you don't mind, I'm going home to bed and I'll be back either later or tomorrow. I'm done with the proposal for the new climate control systems. I'll see you tomorrow." "Okay, Chad, hang in there and hope you feel better." Luke decided to work more on the new business line he was going to create and opened his workstation to pull up the files. He noticed that he had an older version and remembered that he had worked on it over the weekend and saved the files on his home computer instead of uploading it to the company server. He decided that he would ask Becky to email the file instead of driving home. He tried calling the home line, but the phone switched to voicemail. He tried Becky's cell phone, but it was off, which he thought was odd considering she had a work day. Oh well, that was okay. He'd make it home in 20 minutes. Luke was enjoying the weather and the good tunes on the NPR when he turned down his block and pulled up in front of his house. He spotted a car in the driveway that looked familiar, and it didn't take him long to realize it was his friend Chad's Lexus. Luke parked on the street, walked up the driveway, and quietly opened the front door. The first floor was quiet, no lights or radio on. Becky wasn't in the study at the desk. He walked to the kitchen and then heard moans and voices coming from the master bedroom. He couldn't believe in his mind and heart what he already knew in his gut. Someone was making love to his wife in his bed. He grabbed a long Wusthof knife from the shelf and slowly walked up the stairs. He stood in the hallway, obscured by the door jamb so they couldn't see him, but he could hear what they were talking about. They were hugging and talking, and he heard Becky say, "Chad, we can do this a few more times. I think Luke is getting suspicious of my aloofness and my constant texting on the phone. And I don't make love to him more than once a week because I feel so guilty. And it feels so wrong to make love to you and then to him the next day. I've really enjoyed our little affair for the past 4 months. It's my indulgence of my desires to have dirty and illicit sex before I go off the pill to have kids. So I want you to make love to me, because this will be the last time here, and then the Denver conference, and then we're done. Luke remembered that Becky had told him that she was going to a marketing conference in Denver in 2 weeks, and he quickly realized that it coincided with the sales conference that Chad would be attending in Denver that same weekend. Luke was crushed by what he heard. He pulled out his phone and turned on the video, slowly peering out from behind the door jamb. His wife, Becky, was now riding his friend and employee, Chad, riding him like a bucking horse. At that moment, Luke burst into the room, shooting the phone in one hand and a knife in the other. He grabbed Becky by the hair, ripped her away from Chad, turned her around, and pushed her onto the bed. She screamed and saw it was Luke. Her eyes widened, her mouth fell open, and she wailed, "Luke, this doesn't mean anything." At that moment, she tried to get up and walk over to Luke, and Chad tried to move to the edge of the bed and stand up. But Luke held out the knife and yelled, "Both of you sit on the bed and shut up, or you will find a 12-inch blade in your chest. Now!" They both sat up and pulled the sheet up. Becky started sobbing uncontrollably, and Chad started telling Luke, "Boss, it's really nothing. It's just sex. Just a distraction for us. It doesn't mean anything." "Luke, I love you. It was just meaningless sex with Chad. It doesn't change how I feel about you. It was just the last time I sow some wild oats before you and I settle down with kids. Please, Luke, it's okay. Send Chad away. Come and give me a hug and I'll make it up to you." Luke looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "Becky, doesn't that mean anything? Well, I think you've proven that our marriage means nothing to you. You've demonstrated that you don't respect me and that I was a fool to believe that you loved me. How can you say you love me when you've been making love to Chad in my own bed for months? You want me to cuddle with you? I can barely look at you and I will never touch you again, that's for sure. Now just sit there and shut up, you fool." Becky recoiled at the sight of his anger and hurt. He had never spoken to her like that. He practically idolized her and treated her with love and respect, and his response cut straight to the soul. With those words, Luke made a quick call, looked at Chad, and said, "Janie, it's Luke. I'm sending you a video of Chad making love to my wife Becky in my bed. I don't know if you knew he was abusing you and the kids, and I'm just sorry to have to tell you this." Luke was quiet for a few minutes before hanging up the phone and then said to Chad, "She tells you not to worry about coming home. Obviously, this isn't the first time you've betrayed your life and your children. Now add betraying your friend and your boss and ruining 2 marriages. What a worthless asshole you are. I'll give you one chance to save your job. Tell me exactly when it started and how many times you two made love." Becky looked at Luke and said, "Don't make us go over it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything, and it stops right now. Please." Luke's look of hatred and pain made her pull back even harder, huddle into the headboard of the bed, and avert her eyes. She continued to cry and sob as Chad answered Luke. "Luke, please don't throw away our friendship over this, and don't let it affect the good work I do for the company. Becky means nothing to me, and I mean nothing to her. We were only seduced by the power of an illicit affair. This is the 4th time we've been dating. The first time we were both in Denver for different conferences, and I knew she would be there. I called her the first night to go out to dinner. Well, we ate and drank a lot and danced and really felt a spark for each other. So that night and the next, we went up to my room and made love. Then about a month later, Becky called me and said you were going out of town for the day to visit a new construction site and asked me to come over. We ended up making love in your room, and she seemed to enjoy doing it in your marriage bed. 3 weeks later, we got a room at the Hilton Hotel, met for lunch at noon, and had sex there. Now she called me and asked me to get sick, come over and make love to her because she was incredibly horny. We were going to meet at the next conference in Denver next month for the last time and spend 3 nights with each other trying to consummate it. We both felt guilty about doing this to you and my family. Becky knows you want to have kids and she's going off the pill, So we decided that was it, and we're going to be good spouses again. I'm so sorry, Luke. Looking back, I knew it was so wrong, and now I've ruined my marriage, and possibly your marriage and my career if you can't forgive us. Becky looked at Luke and said, Yes, Luke. I was so caught up in the mystery. There was nothing wrong with you, Luke. I love you. I've never loved anyone but you, and I want your children and to grow old with you. You treated me like a queen. Sex with Chad was fun, but it was nothing compared to loving you. Please don't abandon me and our marriage for a mistake. It meant nothing. It meant nothing? Do you even know me? How can you think that letting another man be intimate with you means nothing to our marriage? Do you think I could ever get past the pain of being lied to? To move past the lies and ever trust you again? How could you think I would ever want to touch your cheating body again? How do you think I could have the same spark, the same connection, and the same love that I had for you after you insulted me like that? How can you not see the strain this has already put on our marriage? The lack of conversation and communication. Reducing lovemaking and turning it into just mechanical sex. One drunken night out may be a mistake, but planning and holding meetings at out-of-town conventions and at our house is a bad thing, not a mistake. Becky, for the first time, began to realize what she had done. She had convinced herself that it was meaningless sex and it wouldn't hurt her relationship, maybe even make it stronger. But when Luke spoke, she realized that she had emotionally and physically distanced herself from him. She didn't understand why, since she loved and wanted only him. Maybe it was the guilt she was trying to bury that was eating away at her and their relationship. She thought her affair would never come to light. Luke trusted her so much. She saw that trust would never be the same again. She thought Luke loved her so much, he would forgive, and she would quickly make him forget, being a loving and caring wife and having children. Now she realized how she had been deceiving herself. She had fooled herself into thinking she deserved this, and it would make her a better wife. Now she saw how much pain and disrespect she had poured out on the man she loved so much and wanted to have children with him and a long and happy life. Oh my God, she thought. Have I ruined everything? How am I going to get through this? All she could do was look at Luke and say, Please, Luke, please forgive me for hurting you. I didn't think much about what I was doing. I didn't realize it would be so devastating. I never meant to disrespect you. I never wanted to hurt you the way I hurt you now. Luke picked up his phone and scrolled through the part of the video where she was screaming, Yes, Chad, no one interests me like you do. How you could think you weren't disrespecting me by making comments like that and making love to that asshole in my own bed. You disgust me. Luke looked at Chad and said, There's no way to save your job. Don't bother coming in tomorrow, you're fired. Now get out of my house. Chad started to get up, and so did Becky. But Luke yelled at her, All right, stay there in those dirty sheets, cheater, and don't move. She squirmed in the bed as she saw the hurt and resentment on Luke's face, replaced with anger and pure hatred. My God, what have I done to hurt such a good man and turn his love for me into hate? Chad grabbed his clothes, ran down the stairs, jumped out the door, and sped off in his car. Luke looked at Becky and cried. She got out of bed and tried to go over to him and hug him, but he looked at her in disgust, turned away, and held up the knife to keep her away from him. She burst into tears and ran to the bathroom, locked the door, turned on the shower, and sank to the floor. She hoped that maybe if she gave Luke space, he would calm down and they could talk. It was her only hope. She cried and washed for half an hour. After washing her face, toweling herself dry, and putting on a robe, she quietly opened the bathroom door, fearing another furious scream from Luke and knowing she deserved it. But the room was quiet. She looked out into the hallway, and the house seemed quiet. Luke, I'll make up a spare bedroom for you and stay away from you for as long as you want, until you calm down enough to let me talk to you, explain my actions, and apologize. She heard no reply. She saw that the dresser drawers were open and empty, and most of the clothes in his closet were gone. 2 large suitcases from the closet were gone. Then she turned around and saw a 12-inch butcher knife stuck up to the hilt into the pillow and mattress. She realized Luke was gone and could only hope he stayed safe, didn't hurt himself, and would return her calls when he calmed down in a day or 2. She went into the spare bedroom, threw herself on the bed, curled up in a fetal position, and cried until she fell asleep. Luke went to his office and spent a very restless night on the couch in the adjoining conference room. He notified HR and security that Chad was terminated. Later that morning, Chad did show up on site, assuming Luke had cooled off, but security took his badge, walked him to his car, and told him that if he showed up again, the police would be called. Luke spent a couple hours alone at his desk, pondering where to go next. He clearly realized that despite the depth of his love for Becky, their marriage was over. He would never be able to feel that same spark of joy, trust, and deep union of his heart and soul with her. And that meant the marriage had failed. Pride, resentment, anger, jealousy. It didn't matter what to call it. She was no longer his life partner. Having children was out of the question. It was over. Luke called his CFO, and they spent 4 hours of very detailed discussion about the value of the company and what Luke had decided to do. His right-hand man, the CFO, was stunned to hear about Chad and Becky. He begged him not to do anything rash, to let his anger and pain subside for a few weeks and then decide what he wanted to do. But Luke had already made his decision. Becky woke up in the morning, and the pain and hurt she saw on Luke's face quickly came crashing down on her when she fully came to her senses. "Oh my God, how could I have been so stupid? Some mediocre sex with someone I barely like, much less have no love for, may have ruined my marriage to the only man I truly love. What is wrong with me?" She was determined to fix it, to get Luke back. To get them both back to the way they were before she'd been stupid enough to have an affair. She was sure that Luke loved her so much that he would never leave her. She couldn't resist calling his cell phone. It immediately went to voicemail, so she left him a message. "Luke, I'm so sorry. I love you so much, and I know I hurt you, and I'm so ashamed. But Luke, you love me and I love you, and we can get through this. I'll do whatever you want me to do to make it go away. I promise I'll be the best wife and mother you could ever hope for. Please come to me or call me. I need you. Please talk to me, Luke." There was no response from Luke that day or the next. On the 3rd day, she called his administrator Brenda at the office. Brenda was very close to Luke, in fact idolized him, and Luke had told her about what had happened between Chad and Becky. Brenda returned Becky's call and explicitly informed her that Luke was busy, instructed her not to let her call him personally, and that he would be happy to be left alone until he was ready. Becky assumed that she'd meant willing to talk, but Brenda hadn't actually said that. Well, at this point, Becky assumed that Luke needed time. Becky called Chad and now knew that Luke had indeed fired him from his job. She had also heard that Chad's wife had kicked him out, and he had moved back in with his parents. He hinted that he wanted to come over and talk to Becky about Luke forgiving them, but she told him to back off, and that she never wanted to talk to him again. She placed most of the blame on him, even though she subconsciously realized that she was fooling herself and felt just as guilty, if not more so, than Chad. She couldn't understand why she'd really done it and how stupid it had been to risk everything they had with Luke. Becky gave Luke a week and then couldn't take it anymore. She called his cell phone, but the number was no longer in service. She called his office and was told that Luke would not be available and she should stop calling. This was too much for her. She had to go all out. She had wanted to keep her affair a secret, hoping and assuming that Luke wouldn't want family and friends to know that she had cheated on him, but now she started calling all of his friends and asking if they knew where he was staying and what he was thinking. They all replied that they had nothing to tell her, and that Luke had told them it was their own business. The disdain with which they treated her made her realize that Luke had probably told them about the affair, and that added to her shame and sadness. Becky eventually called Luke's parents to see if he was staying with them, But when they picked up the phone and she introduced herself and said hello, they hung up. She called again and they switched to voicemail. She went to Luke's company and talked security into letting her into the lobby. They called Brenda, who approached Becky and bluntly asked her what she needed. Becky was close to tears and said, "I want my husband to come downstairs and talk to me. He should respect his wife enough to talk to me and let me explain." Should he respect his wife as much as she respected him in their marriage? Maybe you need to think more about what you did. Anyway, Luke doesn't work here anymore. He has sold the company and moved out of the area and has made it very clear that he is not giving you any information about his current status, well-being, or location. Now please leave, or I will have security escort you off the premises. Becky rushed home in utter confusion. Sold the company? He would never do that. Left the neighborhood? Why wouldn't he talk to her? She sat down to her email and tried to write him a long letter of apology, but when she sent it to both his personal and work email addresses, it came back, addresses invalid. She called his parents again, but they blocked her number. She went back to the spare bedroom and collapsed on the bed. For the next 4 weeks, Becky lived like a zombie. She heard nothing about Luke, not a word about where he was or how he was coping with their marriage. In desperation, she hired a private detective firm, and eventually they sent her a report with limited information. They told her that Luke had sold his company, and although the exact price hadn't been made public, it was estimated to be gone for more than $20 million. They told her that he had closed all of Becky and Becky's joint accounts and credit cards, canceled his phone, internet, and email, sold all of his valuables, and apparently left town. They told her that Luke had paid off the mortgage on the house and put the bill of sale in her name. They were unable to get any of his friends, co-workers, or relatives to tell them anything about his whereabouts or how to contact him. 8 weeks after Luke left, a man came to the front door and handed Becky an envelope. She saw that Luke's name was written on the address label and opened the envelope, hoping to get some information. The first thing that fell out when she opened the envelope was his wedding ring. Then some paperwork, and then a photograph that had been cut into strips. Picking up the pieces of the photo, she saw that it was their wedding portrait that had been put through a shredder. She couldn't stand it and cried for several minutes until she was able to open the rest of the contents of the envelope. There were legal documents and a letter. In the envelope was a flash drive. She grabbed the letter and started reading. "Becky, I know you wanted to see me, talk to me, and were sure we could end your affair. You thought it was just meaningless sex, a mistake, something I should just forget, and that we would go back to our marriage as it was before you decided to break our wedding vows and my trust. I was amazed that you could delude yourself into thinking that the same, or even close to what we had, was ever possible. I know you never loved me, at least the way I loved you, since you were able to deceive me. You didn't seem to realize the pain you caused. No one had ever hurt me like that, and the fact that it came from the woman I loved more than life was too much to ever forgive. I could never trust you again, never be able to touch you or make love to you again. Maybe you don't remember what happened, or maybe it wasn't important to you. If so, I have attached a video of you and Chad destroying our marriage. Your words alone are enough to break my heart every time I think of them. From the calls I initially received from our very close friends and family about how I could leave you and why I was so cruel to disappear from your life, it is clear to me that you never took responsibility for your actions. I'm sorry to say that this same video with another letter was sent to these people to make them realize the depth of the betrayal, and that there was nothing that could be done about it. I was so devastated and destroyed by you that I decided to take revenge. I am not happy with my actions, but I believe they were the only path open to me. I have decided that from this day forward, you will never hear from me again. You will never see me again, and I will never return to our home, our town, maybe even our state. I guess I'll never understand why you did it. What drove you to do it? I hope you figure it out before you have another serious relationship, and I hope you remember my pain before you start cheating on someone again. I hope that someday in the near future I can get over the pain, humiliation, and disrespect I went through, and I can remember the old days in our relationship that were filled with love. I hope that someday, instead of the hatred I feel for you, I can at least feel indifference, or I can find forgiveness or understanding. However that may be, you'll never know. You may not care, but I'll never know it. And that's what I'll live with. Goodbye. The last set of papers in the envelope was titled Dissolution of Marriage, but at this point, Becky saw nothing through her tears and collapsed to the floor. It had been 5 years since Luke had disappeared, and just as the letter had said, Becky had not heard a word from anyone about his health, his spirit, his whereabouts, or his life. Luke was very generous in the divorce decree, offering her $1 million, a house and property, in lieu of any ongoing financial support. Her attorney told her that this was the best offer she could get since the $22 million that Luke sold the company for was not kept in the United States and would never be available for any legal compensation. Becky really didn't care. In her opinion, she deserved nothing and would never fight what Luke thought was fair. At first, her life was very difficult, as friends and family saw the devastating video of her making love to Chad in her marital bed. She realized how much she had hurt Luke and how she herself had caused him to hurt her by sending the video. She also realized that it was a way to prevent anyone from asking about what had happened and if they could be together again. She felt extremely humiliated, embarrassed, and hurt that friends and family had seen it, but realized that it wasn't yet as bad as what she had done to Luke. She lived with her shame and, at her parents' insistence, decided to see a therapist to work on her grief and depression and try to turn her life around. She had a few dates, but she never seemed to enjoy herself or let anyone in on her private thoughts and pain, so nothing ever progressed beyond a few painfully awkward encounters. There were a few nights where she tried to find solace in sex. They were so awkward, so humiliating, and served as such a grim reminder of what had once been and how she had sunk to that point, that she could no longer bear the thought of meaningless sex. When Luke left, he took away the photo albums, and she was left with no pictures of them together, and with each passing year, the memories of his looks, his voice, his spirit and personality, his loving touch, gradually faded from her life. The end! Subscribe to my channel? Thank you!